All right, this is Kess again. It is Thursday, July 26th, 1990. I'm up in Sierra Madre Canyon, Southern California, at the home of my friend John Dan Reib, who has been teaching for,
24 years at Pasadena City College. English, it's supposed to be.
24 years.
Mm-hmm.
And we want to talk a little bit about affective education, self-esteem, the self-esteem of teachers, and so forth.
Okay.
I've told John that I'm on the task force and that I'm seeking ideas for people. And knowing John, I know he's got much input, and hopefully we'll be able to share some of it with us today. Our task forces have been broken down into a policy, curriculum, and definition, which is the one that I've been primarily involved with, because I think that's the beginning of philosophy and definitions. Curriculum issues, meaning implementing curriculum for affective education. Training issues, which pertains to training teachers. Public relations, networking, and also self-esteem for staff for the school district. So we're interested in input on any of those areas that we can get here. One thing we could start out with is the purpose of education. What would you say, in a few words, John, is the purpose of public education in America today?
Well, the de facto purpose, unfortunately, has become lost because we have gotten involved in a lot of finite aims and possibly a misinterpretation of an 18th century term in the Declaration of Independence, where it said that we were entitled to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We're not supposed to find happiness, we're supposed to pursue it, is the contemporary term. The pursuit of happiness in 18th century English meant that you were supposed to live life in the most beneficent and serene way possible. And the meaning of the language has changed, so that we put a neurotic spin on the meaning of it. And that's part of the problem. Okay, because of this, because of the proliferation of people, because of commercial advertising, we have lost our sense of aim or direction, which I take to mean the sense of purpose. I would say that my sense of purpose as an educator is to allow students to discover how to relate to others with mutual benefit. And in line with the 18th century definition of the pursuit of happiness, rather than the 20th century definition, which means to be able to live life as serenely as possible, to discover how to do that, and as effectively as possible. And right now, because we're destroying the planet, to learn how to save the planet. So we've got to learn how to be a lot less selfish. And we've got to change a lot of self-concepts, a lot of basic models, and a lot of other things. That's what I'd say.
We've got a humongous, as they say, humongous job on our hands.
Quite.
Everywhere we look, there's things to be done to direct us on the wholesome pathway. Well, speaking of self-concept, one of our concerns with affective education, thinking of it as the development of healthy self-esteem, a good value system, and the ability to get along with others and form good friendships. Can you give any guidelines how education can help students to develop a healthy sense of self-esteem?
Okay, you've got several problems. And again, what would be going on up in Anchorage might be quite severe on certain levels, because I'm sure that because of the pipeline, various other things, economic boom and bust, or what Alvin Toffler calls ecospasm, I'm sure that Anchorage has problems. Probably alcoholism and suicide become a problem in the wintertime, and there are social pressures, people who are employed and people who are unemployed, seasonally employed or disemployed people. You've got a variety of things like that. And yet I see that up in Anchorage there would be a heck of a lot more opportunity to develop something new, because you don't have the population, and you do have a few people who are going to be reliable. You got to be reliable in that kind of freezing cold weather. Who can actually become good change agents in the society. So I could talk about Anchorage only distantly. I ought to relate to. I know that you guys will interpret everything that I'm saying and use it as you need. Please realize that if I sound kind of know-it-all-ish, I'm talking about my own situation, and if it doesn't apply to yours, I'm interested in hearing that. Okay. A national purpose, I'd say, frankly, that we're in a decayed state, our culture is right now. I don't know if we're going to pull out of it or not. By decayed, I mean that we have become not one public, we've become many publics. Now, Marshall McLuhan says because we become many publics, there are certain publics that are going to be healthy and certain are going to be unhealthy, and somebody's going to be able to carry it and preserve it and make it good. Now, that helps a teacher with self-esteem. I'd say the worst problem with self-esteem that a teacher has, particularly a brand new teacher, is desire to reach everybody. And I would say that that doesn't always, and some teachers try to reach everybody, don't, and then they become jaded out and they just do a job. Particularly if they have, in the K through 12 area, they have oppressive administrators who are trying to toady to parents or to somebody or other. This is a problem in Southern California. This is why Southern California's public education is mediocre in many cases. It's because you have administrators who are trying to cover up evil and toady to parents and toady to everybody else and just get over, and they don't like teachers to make waves or to do something that's radical and different.
What do we mean by evil here? Cover up evil.
Okay, evil means doing harm to others or another, and particularly doing harm or destroying the innocent or taking aliveness or liveliness away from someone. And I cite the definition of evil specifically in Scott Peck's People of the Lie.
Oh, thank you.
I'm almost quoting that.
Yeah, well, it's a powerful term, evil. It has many associations.
Well, evil is a real thing in our society. And heck, there's I'm thinking about right now a lot of things that we're facing, and I teach city college. I teach community college, so essentially I'll get students who are what I call bio-adults from certain feeder communities around here. And by the way, we're not talking race here. This goes across race, color, creed, sex, and sexual preference. The phenomenon of the bio-adult. What is a bio-adult? A bio-adult is an 18 to 23-year-old human being of male or female sex, of whatever persuasion, who behaves like an 8th grader and who emotionally interacts like an 8th grader and who has no sense of adulthood. Now, what do I mean by adulthood? I mean adulthood means that one who is an adult is one who is aware that he or she needs to be able to earn money in order to feed his or her face and anybody else's face that they happen to have produced by reproduction.
Responsibility.
And it's a responsibility, meaning I've got to be a member of society. I want to be a member of society. I want to go out and earn a living. I want to make a contribution to others. And I can relate to people of a variety of ages and groups and different ethnic groups and races. I can relate to these responsibly. What I'm saying is I find a variety of somewhat good-natured, and I call them kids because they're kids. A vast majority are, and they're very naive. They do not connect what's happening with in school with what's going on outside. As a pessimist, I'd almost have to say that we need a war in order to shake people up, or the fear of death. I mean, it seems that way because they don't have a fear of death. They have no concept of it, and so they have no sense of the value of life in some cases. Now, these are a lot of the students that I'm working with. There are individual exceptions, and it's scary right now. It's very scary. I.e., what do I mean by scary? I mean that if you like democracy, and, okay, I suppose I've been accused of being an elitist. I must confess that I am a Jeffersonian elitist. I would affirm an aristocracy of the intelligent, or people who, of course, agree with me, right? I would tend to be prejudicial in their favor. Because I'm a nice, reasonable person, and of course I know the answer to all problems, and I'm willing to admit when I'm wrong, and if we could have a whole bunch of people like you and me, Kess, then it'd be all right. And the rest of the people can just haul wood and draw water. But, that's one level I can go har about. But since I'm not sure who all of these people might be, and I might be wrong about something at some point, I like the idea of democracy, or a representative government, if you will, of some form. Well, what's happening is that some of these people are such goldfish in foggy water that I'm working with. And I'm not just saying what's this generation coming to, because please bear with me. I'm going to say something in a minute that kind of is an exception to this, and it's a scary exception in a way. They are such goldfish in foggy water, such followers of leaders, such mindless twits, that I don't see much. I don't see much future for democracy.
Democracy. Well, democracy does seem to be in trouble. Many have commented on this.
Yeah, and on the other hand, I've met students who are so good they almost scare me. I mean, I like them. I've had the privilege of working with them. I pushed them through to. There's 3 groups of people that I could think of. I mean, there's more groups in the majority group that I could split and classify. But for purposes of hideously simplifying everything for this discussion,
yes,
I would say that the bio-adults is the 80% majority of students.
These are people who are emotionally immature.
Yeah, they're 8th graders. Now, the other thing about them, this is kind of obscene, and I'm not advocating doing this, but one of the most interesting things is 10 years ago, every semester, I'd get a female student from 18 to 23 who wants to relate to me on an emotional level. Okay, this used to be standard. And of course, there's a lot of disadvantages with doing that. I married one of my former students and cured myself of that. So I always discourage it because it isn't affection. It's about the same thing as falling in love with a uniform.
Yeah.
In other words, I'm in a position of authority, and somebody wants to find out about adulthood in an intimate way, and so they make it pretty damn clear. A number of years ago, there used to be some, sexual solicitation or sexual harassment. I always discourage that by saying it goes right into the department chair, because I'm not going to lose my job over something like that. I mean, it's ludicrous, right? And I tell them that. But one of the interesting points that I want to make, because I'm going far afield, is that in the last 5 years, no female students have come on to me. Now, I'm a little bit tubby the last year and a half, so I could say that. But before that, I was quite thin, and no, these students don't relate to anybody who isn't their own age, except as an odd curiosity. They don't get that someday they're going to be 50 years old.
They
don't get that they're going to be 30. They just want to get it on with their own little group.
They want to be their peer group identified.
Their peer group identified to the point of pathology.
That's their mythic membership is within.
Yeah, in other words, to use Thomas Keating's term, Kess just turned me on to Thomas Keating. I'm terribly enthused. A good mind from any source, or a saintly being I'm always interested in knowing about. Yeah, I'd say that there's a mythic membership problem with a lot of contemporary students. Now, the super killer students that I've met fall into 2 categories. There's one type which I call a detached intellectual. Now, a detached intellectual is somebody who will do real good in grades and is behaviorally about as stupid as a bio-adult. I know this one lady, well, she was older, she was 35, who I told her she could make, within 5 to 10 years, she could become a journalist in Vanity Fair magazine, for instance, and she could be making $200,000-300,000 a year. And instead of that, she just totally screwed her life up. So that I always try to have my students watch the movie The Manchurian Candidate. And I attempt to get them to see this movie, because what we do is we talk about the character who is brainwashed and looks at the Queen of Diamonds and always does what is told him when he sees the Queen of Diamonds, because everybody has what I call their inner Manchurian candidate, their automotor robot self, and I've seen a lot of bifurcation like that, a lot of splitting off, where you'll have the super people who are good at grades, one that I knew of who was good at grades and had 14 abortions.
Oh.
Who was a professional student, had 2 or 3 degrees, but was a complete monkey house in the emotional life. Now that's severe alienation. Now that's an exaggeration. That's an older person, but I knew this student when she was 18.
Uh-huh. Well, that emotional development is what affective education is
affective
about.
education is about that. Well, this is somebody who's intellectually sharp, but emotionally just screwed up.
So
you've got that category, but there's only, that's in the top 10%. That's 3 to 5% of the top 10%. And then the other ones are competent. And some of them, well, you can always say there's somebody that you didn't notice in a room that later wakes up, or they come up to me. I very seldom will encounter, I've been in this community long enough to be a minor celebrity. I'll go out for dinner or something and 3 or 4 people come by the table. It's that kind of thing. If I want privacy, I got to go to another community. It's all right. I mean, I don't feel bad about it. I very seldom get any flack from anyone. In fact, I could count maybe 2 or 3 times I've gotten bad vibes from people who were in my class in the past. But these are just sour. I'd say for 24 years it's a pretty good percentage. These are sour faces anyway. And most of the time, it's in one case that happened, and somebody else was in the room who was one of my good students, and there almost got to be a Donnybrook. At least verbally, this good student was putting the student who was sour grapes down. So, there's that. But I'm saying that it's a very eerie time to be alive, and my message to anybody in the Anchorage school district is, hey, best wishes to you, and don't get hung up if you can't reach more than 5 students a year.
This is for teachers.
This is for teachers. If you reach 1 a year, you've done something. Now, the point that I would make, and it's something that it was pointed out to me when we were studying Russian history in the old days, and this whole right-wing kind of John Birch-oriented, one has a youth someplace. Please, any leftists, don't get mad at me, just bear with me. But we were studying the Soviet Union and how Lenin got this thing organized. And a guy who was leading the group was quite inspired, and he asked us, how many people founded the Soviet Union? And people would say, well, there must have been 15,000. There must have been definitely had to be 750,000 people. He says, no. The 25 people in the Petrograd Soviet inspired everybody else, and they worked in a block system and got it done. And I said, wow. And later, when I was educated, that always inspired me. If I can reach 25 people in 5 years, I have moved mountains. If I can reach one person who can reach 25, in 10 years, I've moved mountains. And I think that a lot of new teachers need to realize that. And also, administrators are probably going to listen to this too, and it sounds like everybody's good-natured in Anchorage. I would say that, and I know from an administrator's point of view that you can have a pain-in-the-ass personality who's a teacher who's being some kind of molesting creep or abusive creep, and they're hard to get rid of. So I don't want to sound like I'm unsympathetic with administrators, but I am speaking from a teacher's point of view here. To a teacher, and I'm speaking a teacher's point of view, and I have a knee-jerk reaction against a lot of California public school administrators. I think that, I'd much prefer a leper colony than I do to a lot of California public school administrators. They're scum. And I'm sorry to say that, but it's true. That's in California, guys. I know that Alaska's God's country, and you don't have that problem. What do I mean by scum? The book that needs to be read by everybody is Scott Peck's People of the Lie. They try to cover over evil. Now,
to make things look good.
Yeah, part of it's to make things look good, and they end up with a bunch of self-congratulatory little clubs. Now, right in that, you got to be careful, because right in that, there may be a law that's kind of an old law, some old blue law, that could be enforced. We got a lot of them on the books in California. We got blue laws galore on the books. Now, you might have a blue law that some teacher violated, and there's some fundamentalist group of some sort in some community, and they're trying to go after the teacher, and you got a good-hearted administrator who's trying to protect the teacher because he violated a blue law. He bought liquor to go to somebody's bar mitzvah at a liquor store and was seen entering a liquor store in Brawley, California, and shame on you for entering a liquor store in Brawley, California.
Yeah.
You know, it might be that kind of thing. You have that kind of administrator who's trying to protect his teacher. I'm not mad at that. That's a good person. Or that's an administrator in a good mode. The same person also might be trying to destroy a teacher who wanted to give an honest-to-God D to a Ford dealer's son, and the Ford dealer's coming in and threatening the administrator, whom he knows on the Kiwanis Club. And so you can't give that kid a D or we'll fire you.
That happens?
That happens. I mean, I'm cartooning it.
Yeah.
Or you can't give that kid a D because he's Hispanic. Or you can't give that kid a D because he's a, this at another community college. And by the way, I'm very proud of Pasadena City College. I really am. This kind of stuff does not go on at PCC. If any administrator tried that at PCC, I'd march it right into the pres or into my department chair and then into the pres, and I'd say, hey, Jack's got, I'm not doing it, and Jack would back me. That's why we're good. And I assume, I've heard good things about Anchorage, and I've heard good things about Alaska. I don't think you guys have this kind of problem. But I'm telling you how bad it gets down here in California.
So
Okay?
what does this do to teachers' self-esteem?
It destroys it. But what I'm telling you is, even under the worst of circumstances, when that door is closed, you can reach 1 or 2 to 5 people a year. You've done your job. And it's a very rewarding thing. But hey, you aren't going to be on the Tonight Show and, Andy Warhol's thing, everybody needs to be a celebrity for 15 minutes. One of the decadences in our society, one of the decayed elements, decadences, maybe I've coined a word, in our society is a kind of an unconsciously held automatic assumption that you're not a success unless you're a celebrity.
That's a real poor one, but I think...
Well, no, it's poor, but there's a lot of cathexis on that people have. And I think it's from advertising, and I think it's the media and television.
Yeah, I think that...
And that you're somehow...
You're right.
Your life is sacred, it's endowed, it's wonderful if you are a celebrity. Now, let's take Ed McMahon. I don't put the guy down. Apparently he's got a drinking problem. I'm not saying he's a bad guy. I don't hate him. I don't put him down. I don't ridicule him. I'd love to win money on American Family Publishers and have him give me the money. I mean, so I'm not putting Ed McMahon down. But let's say Ed McMahon's a celebrity. If you look at his life in the National Enquirer, it's about it's like the world according to Garp. Now, a lot of our lives, I've been divorced twice. My second divorce was very strange. And I'm still scratching my head and going, huh? And if I started to sound like what had happened, I'd probably sound like an MCP. A lot of women say he's just a male chauvinist pig. I would preface that by saying I've talked to ladies who have been through it by the way, I'm friends with my second ex again. But I look at that phase in our lives and I go, huh, weird. Still, the doublethink is there. A lot of people will say, if you're not a celebrity, you're not cool. If you're not driving a Lexus, or I don't know, what's prestigious up there, you're not driving some kind of incredible sport utility vehicle or whatever it is, you don't live in Turn-Again Arm or whatever it is, you're not cool. I don't know if that exists. There may be different prestige levels in different groups. So I don't know what's going on in Anchorage. I just have a vague smattering of ignorance. But a lot of people have that. And they put it on teachers. Now, the history of this in teachers, Alan Bloom's The Closing of American Minds is a good book. Preface to that is Richard Hofstadter's Anti-Intellectualism in American Life. I think that people ought to have a workshop in which, in fact, I'll run it if somebody wants it, Anti-Intellectualism in American Life, is one of our points that we cover. And we look at it, and we look at how teachers originally were bond servants in this country. Kess, you were showing me, yeah, they were brought over as indentured servants to educate the children of the well-to-do, or, somebody or other as a parson.
These like 1600s?
Yeah, yeah. In a lot of the colonies. And in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, actually this is what Alexis de Tocqueville came over to this country to study our prison system. And he wrote the Journals in America. And he, of course, I always tell, the Germans, for instance, don't even know about de Tocqueville when they're studying American studies. And I said, you haven't read about the United States unless you read de Tocqueville. And there's one other chap, and I can't think of his name right now. Jose Marti, also needs to be published more in English, and he needs to be read so we understand our culture. Marti and some other people. Marti and some other people are. Take a chair. It's okay. Come on. Marti is. Well, anyway, they know about this. What was I just talking about?
We were talking about education and the way teachers have had it, and they were brought over as
what happens is that in France, okay, if you're in a little village in France, je parle français un peu, hein? Je suis né en condition française at Shanghai, China. I was born in Shanghai, China. I speak French, and it's ethnic. On my dad's side, my grandmother was called Maman. So yeah, we've got a little bit of froggy in there, so I can speak French pretty good. It kind of jocks people out. I don't say parlez-vous français. But anyhow, in France, if you go there, they have a little old town meeting someplace. This is talking to the folks up in Anchorage here, okay? They have a little old town meeting. The priest, the judge, and the mayor, and the teacher come in, and everybody stands up. Now, there's a disadvantage to that, because if you're caught doing something wrong in a little French town, you can get just as hung as you could in the 19th century in this country sometimes. There was a female teacher who related to a 19-year-old, I guess equivalent of a high school student, a lycée student. She was having relations with him. They threw her in the cage in prison for 3 years while she was on trial. So don't think that France is going to be hog heaven for a teacher, okay? I mean, that's just a footnote. But still, in this country, teachers, because of the history of teachers being indentured servants, also I was going to mention the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. That's where I got off the subject.
Yeah.
In the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, what they do with pedophiles was very interesting, because where did they get the word penitentiary for a prison? It was from the Quakers. You were supposed to do penance for your sins, and they had these prison guards who made sure you had your bread and water unless you hadn't read your Bible. You're supposed to memorize the Lord's Prayer and all these other things in order to get little brownie points and more bread and water, and then you could march and you get better gruel and stuff. You know, I'm kind of cartooning it. But they were really kinky, but they kind of were into punishing people into the truth, right? This was the penitentiary. Well, they take your local neighborhood pedophile, who used to like to mess with people, and they brand them on the forehead. Never mind the thing about cruel and unusual punishments here. They brand him on the forehead, and after he'd done penance, they'd let him teach boys and girls with somebody watching him with a shotgun.
Oh, Lord.
And they'd reintegrate him into the community that way. Now, we have, in our background, this concept, because it's under the fifth and sixth generations of them that hate me, it says in the Bible, I shall love the Lord thy God, the fourth commandment, I believe. It's a long time since I've been Christian. But it's the fourth commandment. They say that you should, that if you hate God or hate the works of God, that you're going to be screwed up for a whole bunch of generations. There's that idea. Well, we still inherit these attitudes that teachers are inferior. And this is not true, but it's a culturally held attitude. And to some degree, there's a little self-fulfilling prediction in it, where you have bad administrators and you have people who can do something besides teach. They will move on. rather than fight the system. Because we've also had what, up to now? Even in my childhood, you can't stay in this community, go find another one. That used to be the great American solution.
Sure, love or leave.
Love it or leave. But now it's getting too crowded. I'm sure there's a little bit of love it or leave attitude up in Alaska because there's still some room, but it gets damn cold. There's getting to a point where, hey, leave and go where?
Teachers are still a legacy, aren't they, of the predecessors?
Yeah. So we have that problem. And what I'd say is...
Yeah, what can we do to help teachers feel better about their job? I mean, they certainly deserve to. They've got a hard job, a big responsibility. They work hard. They are not paid real well. They are not given a heck of a lot of recognition in
Let
society.
them have PX privileges. Yeah. Let me get a brand new rig for 10 grand instead of 20.
Well, you were mentioning some kind
Take
of
15, I like 4x. So I'm talking to people like, I call them utes in Australia, SUVs here, or a rig, that means a four-wheeler. I'm sure they use a lot of them up around Anchorage, or they use airplanes. You know, let you get an airplane on discount. All kinds of perks and privileges, right? And then what will we get? We'll get a bunch of corrupt teachers. Ha 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 ha! We can't win. It's a human error.
Let's hear it for Brad.
Yes.
Well, you were talking about 7 points or something the
Oh,
other
okay.
day.
No, you don't come back.
Oh, was there something?
No, I was just visiting.
Oh, well, you can stay if you want to hear me pontificate. Anyway, okay, no, I have a system. Because my students do not have a basic set of values always, I give them a core, C-O-R-E, core of values.
Mm-hmm.
And I call these the 4 basic elements of academic aliveness. I also teach them how to use flashcards. We have a question with a complete interrogative sentence on one side of a 4x6 note card and the answer, and one complete sentence on the other. So it's kind of a catechism I teach them. And I tell them you don't have to buy it, just know it. Okay. And I also am preparing them for what? Learning buzzwords and definitions and all kinds of isms and ologies that they're going to learn in any field in the sciences, technologies, humanities in college, right?
Yeah.
We're basically preparing them for that. And they go crazy with the flashcards. Some of them love them, some of them hate them, but some of them come back and say, hey, you gave me something to hang it on to. So this is it. I tell them the 4 basic elements of academic aliveness are knowledge, documentation, self-control, and organization. And I can give you copies on this later. I can get this out for you.
Yeah, I would like that. It would be a good resource.
Okay, what do I define knowledge? I don't start with knowledge, but we can start. I call knowledge, we talk about the human cognitive system, the fact that everything we see goes on in our own heads. And I use an example that Robert Anton Wilson quotes in The New Inquisition, Bucky Fuller uses to show that we're getting everything through our optic nerves and our senses, and it goes on in our minds. So we want to we're dealing with the universe of consciousness, if you will. And then I talk about that, but I want to get into knowledge. I'll get into the main thing that a lot of people need that has to do with affectivity. I talk about the cognitive system. I define it, and I have a definition of knowledge, documentation, self-control, and organization. I usually start them out with self-control. Now, how do I define self-control? Okay, we have a flashcard. Question: what is the definition of self-control? Answer: self-control means knowing what to do, when to do it, and when to stop. Okay? Now, I then tell them that there are 7 aspects to, or frames of reference within which we can talk about self-control. The next question: what are the 7 parameters of self-control? Answer: the 7 parameters of self-control are timing, patience, persistence, perspicuity, celebration, cogitation, and inspiration. Now we talk about life within these 7 terms. And I tell them, look, I'm teaching you about this. I'm not teaching you this as a belief system. It's like a ruler. It's like a metric system or the English system. You can measure things in terms of this. Mm-hmm. And you can categorize phenomenology. Now I tell them, okay, what's timing mean? It's the next flashcard. Timing means the ability to determine appropriate durations for the completions of tasks as well as occasions for and intervals between events. Now, one of the things I point out under that is watching television messes up a lot of people's sense of time. And this also causes alienation. Why? Look at a show like Dallas or Falcon Crest or any of these others, and you get problems that are solved in 34 minutes, not counting commercials. Okay? And there's been a lot written about that. And they never show, if they show somebody in college, they have before, during, and after shots. They never show somebody having diarrhea in the bathroom. They never show somebody having a migraine headache. They never show anybody with vaginal infections or urinary tract infections. They never show anybody really flunking or having a headache or having pink eye. They don't show human reality. They never show something that's an unresolved conflict. They always resolve it or bury it conveniently. So I think television is, it's almost like a syphilis bacillus in our culture. I'm very phobic about a lot of the episodes on network television because I think television, and commercial television in particular, operates as an opiate in our culture. Anyway, and it screws up people's sense of timing.
Yeah, it gives us a lot of unreality.
And it gives us a lot of unreality. Okay, now the next definition is patience. And it screws up people's sense of patience. What do I mean by patience? What is the definition of patience? Patience means the ability to wait, W-A-I-T, to endure boredom, delays, and obstacles, and to adjust expectations to possibilities. Now, there we go again.
I like that one.
With the kind of stuff that Thomas Keating's talking about and what happens to people on television. That if you have all the goodies, you're going to have the good life, and therefore it's supposed to work. And then you get, in the old days, these kids are too young to remember Freddie Prinze and Chico and the Man, where you get everything suddenly, and then you get drugs, and you go through terrible mood swings and commit suicide. Because too much money can be as unhappifying, there's a nice word to coin, as too little. Okay? So we're at timing, patience. Persistence is the next parameter. In other words, in order to know what to do, when to do it, when to stop, you need to know how to keep at something long enough. A lot of these kids will attempt to outline or they'll attempt to learn how to write, and then they give up because it doesn't happen in the amount of time that they expect from having watched television.
Yeah, they want it right away. I heard a story about a bright kid. There's a daughter, actually, of a friend of mine in Boulder, and her daughter went to school, to kindergarten, the first day of school. She was all excited about going to school. She came home all depressed, and her mom says, "Well, what's the matter?" She says, "Well, I didn't learn how to read today."
Yeah, well, that's pretty good. Okay, persistence means the ability to keep at a project or a task either till it is finished or till one is satisfied with one's results. There's some things that aren't finished. You can do them to a certain point, like practice on a piano. Then you can over-practice, and then you're not ready for the recital. So that's persistence, to keep at things. However, you can persist at something that can kill you. As I've told students who overschedule, there's several other things I have in here that I'll give under a subcategory under perspicuity.
Okay. I want to hear that one because that's a nice.
Well, this is the kind of thing I do as workshops for teachers sometimes. I introduce this stuff to them so that they can show. And I can't teach about emotion so much. I think that your friend Robert Bly, does good at that. Some other people do. But I can teach how to format data and give people a core so that they can have verbal handles to put on their experience. That's kind of the way I go about it.
Yeah.
Okay. The next one is perspicuity. And again, some people say, that's what? I get people used to having an academic vocabulary.
By bringing in a word like perspicuity,
yeah.
Do it?
And, because they need to get used to that. And I get accused of having $1 million vocabulary, even by some of my colleagues, and I say, well, there's no substitute for quality. I have no ego problem or anything like that. But anyway, perspicuity means the ability to see through clouds of mood and attitude, as well as around obstacles, to remember what one originally intended to achieve, and either quit, postpone, which is different than procrastination, or persist till it is achieved. Okay, now why that definition? Sometimes if you're doing something that's killing you, like you're taking, say, 18 units, and 3 of those units are with a teacher that's totally demoralizing you, even if it's a good class and you need to take it later, maybe you need to drop that course so you can get the other 15 units through. And that's perspicuity. That's saying, hey, I took on too much.
No, so
okay?
It's a kind of a
or I'm going to quit, and maybe I'm going to postpone it. Or if it's something that I find, I just got into a business that just bombed myself on the outside. I don't think I can come back to it. I don't have the temperament for it. I'm not single issue enough. I don't want to be putting down people who can make money at that business. I am not of that temperament. I don't want to spend the time doing that.
Well, it's knowing what's right for you and when it's right.
And so I would say that this thing I quit. But I'm not going to lie about it, and I don't need to turn around and make those people wrong who are in that business. I just don't want to take the time to do this. It brings my blood pressure up. And I've talked to a couple of other people who say that, and we don't need to put this other group down. That's an example of why perspicuity is part of knowing what to do, when to do it, and when to stop. Postpone means I'm deliberately, we postpone things. Some students, some teachers are self-naggers. They try to get their students never to postpone anything. Well, you can't. You got to postpone certain things. You got to postpone rewards, and sometimes you postpone work. But you got to know how to do it in terms of timing, time planning. So procrastination is neurotic postponement. When it doesn't work, it goes out of control. Postponement is a conscious thing. And how do you know whether you're right or wrong? By your results. That's the only test. Okay, the next self-control parameter is celebration. What is the definition of celebration? Celebration means the ability to derive enjoyment and inspiration from one's life endeavors, especially those which are sad, boring, or depressing, and to plow that back into one's life and utilize it to keep going, rather than wasting it and getting wasted. Now, here's where I bring in the whole stuff about drugs and drug control. See, people who are addicted to drugs, or they're addicted to alcohol or drugs, don't know how to celebrate. They can't party without getting stoned or ripped. And I point out that this is really kind of lame, okay, to have that problem. I remember when I started teaching back in '66, Kess, back when I first met you. That dates us both. I remember that 67, 68, 69, I'd come into classes at Pasadena City College, and it smelled like a Canava's kitchen in there, and I'd come in and singing, "Don't bogart that joint, my friend, because I've got some narcs in the hall," and everybody had run out of that's where I got accused of being a narc. I just scared all the dopers out because they were following things up. We don't seem to have the problem with the dopers this time. I haven't smelled marijuana in a classroom in years. That doesn't mean there isn't stuff going on. It just means it isn't marijuana. But back to the ranch, we're talking about celebration. I tell them about time planning. I tell them about making their own rules. And again, I'm talking to community college students. Here we go to the Colorado River, we go to the beach. And I also tell them, and this brings in all of the stuff we've done before, about, the 4 failure games that people play. And I use that Eric Byrne's definition of a game. The 4 failure games are overscheduling, shop and drop, friends, clicks, clubs, parenthesis, the prana leech, and cheating. I'll come back to those later. If you want.
I'd like to hear about those.
Yeah. I kind of use that to kind of inspire them. Again, all of this is down on flashcards, and we memorize it, and we talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
And, that there's certain people, even in one's family, who might get threatened by one getting a college degree or changing for the better, and they tend to undermine one. Or in some cases, there's a peer group that doesn't like you succeeding beyond their level. So that sometimes, in order to succeed, you got to be able to stand alone or find a different level of people to run with. And I tell people that.
Yeah.
And, that's going to be an open-ended problem. Again, this comes between perspicuity and celebration. Because I said I've known a lot of students who were just going to come in with a research paper and their buddies show up from somewhere and say, let's go to the river. Colorado River, that'd mean. And then they flunk the project.
So they don't get their work done.
Yeah, why? Because at that time, because of their episodic conditioning from watching television, they've become discontinuous and adventitious in their behavior. They don't have the ability to measure out and postpone rewards, and boom, they'll go to the river. Then they'll come back and say, well, give me an extension. I said, you're dead. You flunked the course. You son of a bitch. Or whatever. Call me an MF or something like that. I said, fine. Flunk. And the reason I like Pasadena City College is they'll back me. I'll flunk them. There are some schools, they're losing their accreditation because administrators will wuss out and they'll say, oh, well, give them another chance. I'll say it's watered down too much already. They've got to learn the reality of deadlines or they can't hold a job.
So
okay, that's part of celebration cogitation. Cogitation's the next one. How do I define cogitation? Okay, this gets to be kind of a thorny subject in different regions of the country. I define it as the ability to utilize one's mental and cognitive and affective faculties and to keep records and journals. And so I do teach them journal keeping.
Mm-hmm.
Now, okay, I do not like the term New Age. I have been in esoterics. Kess and I know each other in that frame of reference for years. I regard my esoteric commitment as being like George Solti in the Fifth Symphony, and I regard a lot of New Agers as being more like Huckleberry Duck in the neighborhood barbershop amateur quintet that doesn't know how to sing, or Guy Lumbago's orchestra. They just don't have it together always. They're nice, they're sweet. Hey, there are meditative techniques, there's martial arts, there's Tai Chi Chuan. By the way, we have a lot of dyslexic students, and I hope you guys are identifying dyslexic and learning impaired students, because Albert Einstein was learning impaired. I'm sure you're up on this. And Tai Chi Chuan should be one of the sports that's taught. I'm probably plugging in here on areas Robert Bly would cover and also that Thomas Keating would cover. Tai Chi Chuan is the dance of the crane. It's one of the bases of all martial arts. And I know a couple of people, in fact, one friend of mine who flunked English 1A 5 times, who is using Tai Chi Chuan, and he's now going through college. He was so damn dyslexic he couldn't read and write, but he's a bright guy. Now he can do it because it's centered his brain.
Tai Chi.
I recommend that.
Helped him balance out.
And that would come in my system under an exercise for cogitation. So would this contemplative prayer thing, so would certain forms of meditation. Now you got to be careful around certain fundamentalists because they hear the word meditation and they get a big red herring on that and they start, it's like the old McCarthy thing. But I always come back with a First Amendment and say, hey, look, if you've got a good religious thing, you need not to attack somebody else's thing. You can attack certain illegal or antisocial behaviors, but attacking somebody on the level of ideas is really kind of unconstitutional or persecuting.
Certainly not in the spirit of the founding of our country.
But because we're going through a lot of turmoil here right under the surface, oh boy, if we ever had a food shortage in the LA basin, it just shakes one up to think what would happen. But anyway, back to the ranch. The last one is inspiration. Now, I have a nice generic definition of inspiration. What is the definition of inspiration? Inspiration means the ability to establish and maintain contact with a higher power and or purpose greater than oneself, and to derive energy, focus, and purpose or aim or direction from that contact.
I like it.
Now, I always teach students what? What is the meaning of definition? And all my students can rattle this off like the rosary of the Pledge of Allegiance. Definition means the clarification of the significance of a given word or term using words or terms other than the original. So my flashcard method that I use, there's a lot more flashcards in this, but the flashcard method that I use, with the 7 parameters of self-control kind of being at the core of it, teaches people a whole bunch of things at once.
Yes.
And it can be used in connection with certain other things, I think, as a common basis. And I think it can be used, I think, by the 6th to the 7th grades.
Uh-huh.
I know I taught my son this stuff when he was 8 years old. He may have forgotten it now. He's 11. And he may need to relearn it if he wants to, but I know it can be done. Anyhow, do you want me to? What do you want me to go into after this?
Well, you were going to talk about the 4
failure games.
Failure games. I'd
Okay,
like to
a
hear
game.
those.
Again, partly quoting, partly paraphrasing Eric Byrne in Games People Play, is a set of transactions between 2 or more individuals with a specifically defined, predictable outcome. Usually, it's unspoken and it's an expected outcome that people get, and it's to get units of attention. There's 3 types of attention. There's harmonious, they're called units of attention as a stroke, which it can be an acknowledgement that's either physical or non-physical. It can be body language, verbal acknowledgement, looking at someone, various tones and structures and suprasegmental factors. Thank you, Polonius. But anyway, that's my definition of a game. A failure game is a game that does what? It's a set of transactions netting the opposite of what one said one wanted to do, and chronically netting that opposite. It yields that opposite. It results in that opposite.
Uh-huh.
Okay. 4 failure games the students play. Again, I simplify it. There are many. You know, you could split hairs and have 38 of them. It could look like a Kama Sutra of failure. You know, the 38 love bites of the Kama Sutra. No, we'll get 4 of them here. Okay, overscheduling. Again, I go back to timing and the 7 parameters of self-control, or the sense of time.
Yeah.
A lot of students will take 18 units because they look at it as hours. And of course, what I do is add up how many hours there are in a week, how many hours in a day, how many you need to sleep, how many you need to go to the bathroom, how many to eat, how many to transportation, how many to kibitz with your friends, how much time does it take to talk to a loved one on the phone or do things we won't mention. You know, these are more adult students. You know, and then we add that up. And these students who are trying to take 18 units of solids, again, they'll come out of high school with no sense of anything.
No sense of time.
And no sense of manners. You know, they'll say to a teacher, well, that's just your opinion. And so I've got to bring them in. See, it's so nice when we had wars and you'd have veterans in a class. And occasionally now I'll get people who've been in the service, and usually there are some assistants. Because I'll ask them, do you salute the uniform or the person? They always say the uniform. I'll say, okay, you never say to a person who's taking the position of teacher, you never say to the teacher, that's just your opinion. You write the opinion down. Now, my dad was a minor historical figure in Shanghai, where I was born. And I recall a time when I was in grad school, and at Cal State LA, this guy was teaching the history of modern China, and somebody said he'd mentioned my dad. Well, I went into that class, and I later signed up and took the class. I didn't let him know who I was. He was attacking my dad, you know, and accusing him of all kinds of perfidy. Now, Dan C. Reib was no angel, but he hadn't done all the things the guy said. Nevertheless, and I'm pretty hot-tempered. My daddy's side of the family's Southern, and a streak of Cherokee Indian in there, and French, and a bunch of other stuff that's kind of ornery. And so and my mother's side's ornery too. I could have gotten real riled and invited him out to the OK Corral and had a gunfight. I'd tell him that. But I didn't do that. I just took notes and got an A, and then I went in and put a blue brief on his desk and scared the wee out of him. Yee-haw! But that was after I had my AMA. And I tell him that. I tell him how to get along.
You tell the students that.
Yeah, but back to overscheduling. Overscheduling, these kids will try to do everything at once, and you can always tell because they'll come in and they'll say, well, I don't have enough time to study, and I have a course description we're supposed to pass out, in which I tell them, hey, 12 hours a week on this class. So I said 18 units. You've got, in 18 units you would have 6 courses, so that's 72 hours outside of class to prepare for each course. Do you have that time?
Jeez, yeah.
And a lot of them will say, well, I'm going to try it, and they gamble, and then they crash. And I said, you look at this room, there'll be 35 people in the room. Typically, my 1As will end up with 7. Last semester, 2 passed in one. I had 11 pass in another one. This is in the spring. My English 100s, where I'm a little easier going, I had more students. But I have a kill-off ratio of almost 80% in some of my 1As right now, and I've talked to the department chair about it, and I've said, hey, I'm still trying to teach college English. I don't want to teach watered-down 1A. A new subject called watered down, right? Everything's watered down. But there is a definite decay. So anyway, overscheduling is one of the patterns, and some students need to come back and learn the hard way and all of that and waste a lot of taxpayers' money. And I actually tried to get an orientation program going at my college, and, well, the politics. I don't want to start sounding grouchy, but everybody's got politics and laundry and underwear and stuff. Next one is shop and drop. Now, this is a particular thing in California. You've got snow digging in the extreme and ice digging in Alaska, and you've got people who are tougher. You may not have this kind of avoidism. California, even amongst the native populations here, tended to make people lazy and convenience addicted. Now, what a shop and drop type of person is a person who just goes by an immediate tactile response to a teacher or course. If they dig it and it seems like it's not going to challenge them, they will stay. If it becomes the slightest challenge, they'll drop. And you'll get that. The first time I assign a paper, I found out that sometimes coming on like Killer Joe in a 1A is a little better because you get people used to hard work. But the first time, if you try to gentleman and then assign a paper, half the class won't be there for the paper. And then 3/4 of those who weren't there will try to hustle through. So you got to skunk them. So that's shop and drop. At Cal State LA, they have the most disgraceful degree in the United States. It's called the liberal arts major. It's generally known that California State University at Los Angeles has produced a disgraceful degree. And they're still doing it.
Liberal arts. Yeah.
A friend of mine, his dad was a judge, and he got so disgusted with formal education, he's reading law under his dad. This friend of mine took a liberal arts course at Cal State LA a number of years ago, and literally, Kess, he came in for the first day, came in and took a true-false test at the midterm, came in and took a true-false test at the final, and got an A for the course.
Oh, and that's all he did?
Yeah, that's why people turn their backs on Cal State LA liberal arts majors. That's a scumbag degree. Now, there may be some nice people who took it and actually did some work. But you see what it does, that leperizes things. That's why I say we're in a decayed condition. Okay, friends, cliques, clubs.
Yeah.
Again, the zeitgeist and the socio-cultural milieu have changed. The spirit of the times, the groups of people we're dealing with changed incredibly since I started teaching. But still, there are certain things that one way or another have held to be true. Let me kind of move around here so we don't have the sun in our eyes so much.
Sure, go right ahead.
Because we're having a beautiful sunset here, but it's stabbing me right in the eyes. Okay.
We're still picking you up.
Yeah, all right. friends in cliques and clubs. I kind of touched upon this earlier when I was talking about the fact that certain people can be terribly good friends at certain periods in one's life, and yet when you go through a change, they may be very challenged about that. You go through incredible... Well, Alvin Toffler talks about this in Future Shock, which is another book I recommend my students read. And you could have little workshops on it. Even though some of those issues were true in the 70s, still you have incredible rates of change and incredible data burst and various other kinds of phenomena going on. And the result of that is that you have future shock, and you've got rapid changes. Well, there's a term I use, and I think you'll enjoy it, called the prana leach. That's P-R-A-H-N-A-H, leach, L-E-A-C-H. Prana means life breath, energy. The other term would be a psychic vampire. Now, what do I define a prana leech as? It's a friend, a group, or a club that takes up so much of one's time that one fails in school, or one fails to get one's job done on the outside. Now, that can be, of course, if you got a love relationship, like you're married or living with somebody, and that person's threatened by you being changed, and they screw you up or have fights or get passionate with you at the wrong time, and you don't get your work done. That is a prana leech. Another kind, though, is pretty typical for charitable people, would be somebody where you just got to get work done. I tell some women this. And it may be somebody who's really legitimately in need, like some lady's husband beats her up, and there she is, black and blue at the door, and she's got 3 kids, and she's your sister. What do? I said, if you want to get through school, you get her to a halfway house, pronto, and you call police. And you got to be willing to be called a bastard. Because I said, prana leeches always will say, you're my best friend because look at all you've given up for me. Yeah, you gave up your academic career. So that would be the definition of a prana leech. A clique would be the same thing. A typical, it ranges from people who need your favors, or it'd be a guy who's got a brother-in-law who always needs you to fix his VW or bail him out of jail rather than get your work done. Or people who kind of want to get you into drugs and they want to get you going to the river rather than getting your work done.
So they're things that diverge from what you're trying to do and accomplish. They diverge.
Yeah, they
diverge on your time and your attention. In the name of the mythic membership.
Yeah, mythic membership, that Thomas Keating term, that gets it. Okay, then there's cheating. Now that's an international business, not international, but it's a national business. We have advertisements for people who will give you research papers that you can type up and hand in. And of course, we just had Durenberger get criticized severely by the Senate, and he deserved it. You know, he got censured for being a naughty boy, but he sure looks perfect. And again, that's why I recommend that people have workshops. The guy you need up there for a workshop is old Scott Peck. He deserves it, and probably Thomas Keating, too, and see what they could do on evil in the culture and how we heal it, how we acknowledge it and heal it. How can we give people safe space to get off it?
Yeah.
And that's a touchy thing when you get over to child molesting and stuff. But there are other kinds of evil.
Well, anything
and this
false,
is
the lie, falsehood. That's
the
foundation of it.
And then there are also, let's talk anthropology a little bit. There are also permissive or permitted behaviors that are allowed, that aren't always rational. And that if you run around trying to reform things too much, you kill the spirit of creativity and freedom. So, any position you're in, it's a rough one. It's a real rough one. There's heavy issues here. But cheating is a problem. And so what I endeavor to do is show somebody that if that student can't do a research paper, they can't do what I'm teaching them, they won't be able to deliver in certain areas, and they'll get fired. And I give an example. I can't think of the names right now, except there's one guy named, I think it was Melvin Slutsky, who was cheating at medical research and getting 127 papers out a year at medical research, and they finally caught him because he was playing games of statistics in a computer.
Oh.
And there was another chap that cheated in medical research, I believe, back at Harvard, and his teacher, who had really idolized him and thought he was not idolized him, but it was one of his proteges that was cheating. And he had bell curves on a medicine for hyperactive children. Okay? And the bell curves that he had, where he was supposed to have questioned all these hyperactive kids that had used the drugs and questioned the parents. You know the case. You can probably fill it in. Well, anyway, they caught the guy cheating. Why? Because if he found positively, all the drug companies would have given him all kinds of perks and goodies, and he would have gotten a professor's chair. He had one at a big university, and he would have gotten all kinds of prestige and self-esteem and stuff. So it's not only mythic membership, but it's the lower chakras there on survival and everything else are going on. So you got that whole realm of cheating, and then it's actually teaching synergy, teaching the golden rule, teaching that what goes around comes around. And then, giving examples. I like John Z. DeLorean as an example, where people have prestigious behaviors of certain types, and then they have downfall. We're seeing a lot of downfall, so it's easy to do that. So that's the 4 failure games. Overscheduling, shop and drop, friends, cliques, clubs, and cheating.
Well, that covers it pretty good. And what can we do to encourage the students and also all of us to live healthy, positive values, the kind of values that we want our society to really be the incarnation of? Do you have any suggestions for that? Because I think that's really central to affective education and development, is developing a personal code so that we become self-disciplining. We have a value system that, living it, we feel good about ourselves. We respect who we are and what we are.
Okay, I'm thinking radically here. And I don't know if we can actually do it. I suppose it's being done in certain groups. Christians are doing it. Fundamentalists are doing it. I think we're going to need to work with celebrityism as it exists. For instance, I personally have a blown out enough sense of humor, I just guess a tantric sense of humor, that I can laugh at Andrew Dice Clay. I don't think that some of the rap music that's being played is as nasty as they want to be, and all of that stuff is very healthy stuff. But instead of censoring it, I think what we need to do is develop celebrity models, teachers as celebrity models. Sure. Now, this sounds almost like a contradiction in terms. But I think we need to work with narrowcasting. We need to work with television. We need to have local talk shows in which, Trinity Broadcasting Network does it with Christianity, and there's a lot of people who follow that, okay? What I think we need to do, though, is develop audiences in narrowcasting and television. Like there ought to be a channel where you can see a lot of Robert Bly and you can see Thomas Keating, but you can also see somebody who's a comedian, perhaps, who's got a blown-out sense of humor, even an R-rated sense of humor, who is aiming people at something constructive.
Yeah.
See what I mean? This is the trouble with some fundamentalists and other people. I sympathize with them when they don't like as nasty as they want to be, or the feminists. Some of the stuff that George Will quoted in the latest Newsweek and stuff you guys will have read, some of that nasty lyrics, they say, oh, we want to censor it all. No. We want to boycott it. If you censor it, you drive it underground and you make it delicious and kinky. But if you have kind of an in-groupy thing, you appeal to mythic membership a little bit. This is casuism. This is Jesuitry, okay? If you appeal to mythic membership and say, hey, have you seen this show? You can do that to audiences. You know what I mean? Now, Trinity Broadcasting Network's doing it with the fundamentalists. I'm saying that we've got to have different shows for different levels of people. And that Anchorage probably can figure out how to do that for Anchorage.
Well, we'd love to.
I don't know what you guys would have. Obviously you have a resident African American and maybe Caribbean African populations. You've got Native American. You've got Inuit. You've got Filipinos, Mexicans, Caucasians. A lot of people up there are ethnically not from Alaska, and then there are a few that are residents. And I think you've got a lovely opportunity there with the Inuit and certain Dene peoples and other things of discussing how to develop patterns of initiation. You could do that by narrowcasting on television. I think using television. I think having programming, a lot less network programming, a lot less Falcon Crest, and a lot more narrowcasting.
Narrowcasting.
That's what it's called in video. Or local television. You know, you can't just kick Dallas and Falcon Crest off, probably. I'm talking practically. Narrowcasting means Andrew de Pisano, my Tantric Buddhist teacher, is on a cable channel over on the west side.
Uh-huh.
He's got a program. People watch that. What we've got to do is bring some of that narrowcasting, not necessarily on Tantric Buddhism, but on the issues of affective education and programming which positively reinforces affective education. Programming of, I hate the word wholesomeness because it sounds so squeaky clean, Bowdlerized, and with sex organs removed. But I mean constructive, synergetic programming. And I want other options than the Trinity Broadcasting Network as well as that. Okay?
Yeah.
And I think that Jimmy, I'm saying how they do it. I don't necessarily say they haven't messed up. I mean, look at Jimmy Baker and Jimmy's Baker and Swaggart, right? Or Jimmy Jones. Jimmy is an unfortunate name to have if you're a reverend or somehow. Jimmy Carter's a nice man. I won't say more. But he really is, so I don't want to put him down. But, I mean, what we need to do is we need to celebrate affectivity.
Oh, I like that idea. Yes.
We need to celebrate it. We need to culturally have it there more than we have Falcon Crest in Dallas. Little House on the Prairie is a cute show, or was a cute show. Hill Street Blues had some affective elements in it. Okay? I think J.R. Ewing is funny, but, I think that too many people watch too much things. I think that there ought to be more local content, even on network channels on television.
Bringing in things that are relevant to what's going on in the immediate community.
Yeah.
We're saying.
It ought to be hard to tune in some of the big stuff, some of the hot commercial stuff. Harder.
Well, that's
it's going to take
idea.
some time. I mean, I'm trying to think of things. It's not going to be perfect. This thing's a juggernaut. Now that's the other thing I'd say to teachers. There's going to be a lot of failure. And, gosh, it's learning not to blame oneself for failures, to see where one might have done better, one might be able to do better facing it again, a similar situation. But doggone, there's a lot of failure out there. So it's adjusting expectations and possibilities for teachers. That's what I'd say people need to learn how to do. There's a lot of failure. But I could have you interview a lady who could tell you how vicious the LA school system is, till she got a good administrator. How evil and entrenched it is. In fact, I might set you up with that. Interview. I'll see if I can.
Well, if it would be helpful.
Because you guys ought to talk to her and just see some of the evil that goes on in our problem, so you guys don't duplicate it. I wish you well.
All right. Well, maybe we ought to shut it down here.
Yeah, let's see. It was fun.
We can turn it on again if we get inspired.
Okay.
Here we go. We're on record. We're on tape. Something that's really important in our situation now with children growing up and coming into puberty, becoming young men and young women, has to do with the sex education,
Okay.
the sexual identity, how these energies are handled. I mean, obviously the media is replete with all kinds of messages regarding sexuality in advertising and popular films, etc. And
Never
we are
mind, I just
bombarded
killed a
with it.
mosquito.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah, okay.
So, John, what could you say about sex education, how it could be handled? It seems that a lot of it is falling upon the schools. Some parents object, some want
Again,
schools
you're going to
do
need
it.
to modify. When I talk about public school administrators, I wanted to say something, because I said it earlier, in case somebody does listen to this tape raw. I am saying I know good administrators, but I'm also saying that the general, and there are probably districts that are outstanding, of which I know not, but L.A., let's say, is such a big one, and there are certain others that are big, and there's a lot of entrenched evil. I mean, look at Senator Durenberger. It's not just public schools. But as you said, it was Kali Yuga, and sometimes one thinks that spiritually the bad vibe cast is running it. And again, there are exceptions. I think we need a merit system. I just wanted to add this, of some sort, or a form of acknowledgement for good administrators and good teachers. We've got it at PCC.
It works?
And it's helping, yeah. You can still, the students nominate people, and they're saying everybody who is nominated as well as the person who actually wins the prize. So being nominated is an honor too, and it helps. And administrators get acknowledged too. And I think that there might be areas, but I've heard some horror stories and know of some cases, and I'm talking K through 12. I know of other community colleges that have got some scabby situations too. I'm not saying we haven't had little problems at PCC. I don't believe in hanging out my dirty laundry or theirs, but it's a pretty good outfit, and I'm not ashamed to say I teach there at all. It's a good thing. Okay, sex education.
Yes.
Let's talk about that. I am interested in developing a course. I'm going to talk about 18 to 25-year-olds and up. And it could be designed for K through 12 too, called The Opposite Sex.
Uh-huh.
And I think Robert Bly, one needs to get into one's own sex. And I'm not just talking about the plumbing aspect of it. I'm talking about the emotional, the psychobiologic totality. Men and women have different brainwave patterns, and they need to learn how to communicate with each other. We are there are some cultures in the world where men and women have different languages or different dialects. I believe they do in Japanese. They have different ways of saying things. Almost, it's convoluted. They understand each other's dialect, but there's women's ways of speaking and men's ways of speaking. I almost like that. I don't think we should artificially develop something. But what it does serve to emphasize is we need a course, almost like the Japanese do sex education. We need a course in which we show slides of male and female brainwave patterns, and we talk about how women communicate and how men communicate and the problems they have and how to solve them. And we have workshops. And that may be worked out for adolescents too, so that we can communicate more effectively. And again, sex education. Okay. My whole point, I ran into a problem here a couple of years ago when some old college friend of mine from the Midwest wanted my son and me to visit. And we had 1 year, and then a year we couldn't, like I didn't travel this summer. And then we went back again. And they wanted us to stay like a month. And I told the guy, I said, hey, I'm worried that we are going to culturally burn you guys. And he said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, we're different than you in California. And in some ways I like. Well, what was the big difference? His kids, his wife, thought she was very liberal-minded. This was in a little town outside Springfield, Illinois. And yet she was censoring her kids from watching violence. Okay, my son loves Freddy Krueger. I mean, he doesn't want to act like Freddy Krueger, but one of his ways of processing horror, this would be something Robert Bly would agree with, was he watched Freddy Krueger, and he had a dream where Freddy Krueger became his friend.
So he made peace with that part of himself.
Now, when he tried to share this with the kids there, one of whom was about his own age, everybody freaked out at him, and they called him evil. So what is that? And it ended up that, I'm still technically friends with him, but they really started to come down on us. And I just got us out of there. Because I told her, she was yelling at me and being abusive, I said, hey, I don't take that from anybody anymore. I'm not going to get angry with you, but you just don't talk to me that way. And you don't treat my son that way either. Because we hadn't done anything wrong, and she just didn't like that we would discuss certain things. You're going to run into that. You're going to run into people who are prohibitive and preventative. And what we need to have is a workshop for the adult community as a whole before we do the sex education. And I don't mean what we vote on it. I mean a workshop in which we say, look, this is the stuff your kids are learning in the street. Unless you put them in jail and isolate them or knock them out with knockout drops and do a Sleeping Beauty something, you can't stop them from finding out. And then we need to explain the concept of Martian permission. Now, Martian permission comes from transactional analysis, Eric Byrne's system. A Martian permission denotes any command given with sufficient discord to inspire those to whom it is given either into doing the opposite of what it says or into obeying with deep resentment or in a mediocre performance. Okay? Now, when you censor something, as they should have seen when they tried to censor as nasty as they want to be, you know, that group, that record, that rap record.
I don't know it, but
it's great. I mean, it's great bad. It's really a puker, okay? And you know me, I've got a pretty rank sense of humor, but I understand what DICE is doing differently than feminists do, and they want to censor DICE, and I said, well, that's going to work. Those who do not, quote George Santayana, those who do not learn the mistakes of the past are condemned to repeat them. In essence, what I'm saying is that if you try to censor something in our culture, you make it fun, you make it valuable.
Particularly to anybody who wants to rebel against authority.
That's right. If you ridicule it, you do better.
Yeah, if you can ridicule it.
It can be ridiculed. Okay? We just haven't, it's got to be almost an X-rated ridicule, where you have a bunch of people who are obviously dying of some kind of degenerate VD doing a rap record. You see what I mean?
Yeah, logical.
In other words, you gotta do that. But in order to do this, you got to get together with sincere Christians and other types. And you know, the fundamentalist attitude is that they get data bursted and overloaded, and anything that doesn't agree with them, they want to condemn. That's what I mean by a fundamentalist in the negative sense. Okay, is that if they don't agree with it, they condemn it.
It's a very closed mind.
It's a closed mind. Now, what they've got to see is that being that closed-minded, they are inspiring a lot of kids during adolescence to rebel against them.
Sure they are. I can see that.
And it's a chance they're taking. And, you know, you can't change them. Some of them are going to go ahead and do that. And some of them may be successful at what they do, and a lot of them, I think, won't. That's what I'd say, psychologically. Now, for the rest of them, the parents have got to see, you got to develop a consensus that, hey, we need to be able to talk about riding bareback. We need to be able to talk about prophylactics. We need to be able to present maybe the Roman Catholic point of view that using prophylactics is a big, bad moral sin, but we also need to present Thomas Keating and the whole other thing. We need religious education, too, in the schools. See, this is where I sound like a conservative. But I don't just say Christian. I say we need Buddhist, Jewish, Islamic, Hindu. We need to know all religion. We need to know ethics.
Yeah. Well, I can buy that.
And then in that context, I think the old Japanese slideshow about biology and reproduction is a good thing. We ought to shoot that and see what happens. You know, we ought to look at how the Japanese do it. Now, obviously, we can't take that whole cloth. The Japanese are a homogeneous culture. We are not. But I think that we can, you know, at different levels, we can show how certain behavior yields certain kinds of diseases, and you can do a slideshow, and you can do cartoons of what people do, and then show pictures of people with VD chancres and other stuff, and you know, it's gory, but a little bit of, and you don't want to make the mistake of reefer madness, okay?
No, God,
but you don't want to exaggerate and say, you know, if you hold hands, you're going to get VD and all of that, because we discovered lying doesn't work. But we want to be
masturbate, it'll stunt your growth.
Yeah, or no, the other one. Dick Pierce has this great picture of a family of hereditary self-abusers, alleged, and I mean this was medical dogma in 1910. It's really funny. Okay? So we want to be honest with it, but we also want to, I think, we want to develop some stand-up comedians, even use the rap music motif to satirize certain things, make fun of it, ridicule it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and in raw, you use drugs, you're a butthole. Only buttholes use drugs. Only, you see, there's a delicate line if you do it. You're a butthole if you do it. Well, then screw you, I'll be a butthole. But if you can do it in a way that ridicules it, makes them laugh. See, adolescents don't like to be ridiculed.
Oh,
so it's a delicate thing. But Martian permission is, we forbid this. We ban it. And then, well, you see, we say, well, hey, it's over there. And it's like we have the Colorado Street Bridge where a lot of people used to commit suicide. And for some reason, now that we have the big bridge, nobody thinks about the Colorado Street Bridge. And they've got these great big great big wrought iron spike fence across the thing. But that used to be the national suicide point in the 20s and 30s and even into the 40s and 50s. People would take dives. I remember one guy who said, why don't we put a diving board on it with a 25-cent turnstile or a dime turnstile, and you can pay a dime and commit suicide. And he said, well, it'd reduce the population, one. Two, most people who are committing suicide are into a melodramatic position, and you'd feel absolutely like a horse's ass if you had to just put a dime in a turnstile and walk and dive off a diving board and splat yourself down in the bottom of the arroyo 800 feet below.
I remember when I was growing up, they called it Suicide Bridge.
Yeah. Well, I think that there's a point there to be made, and I think that we need to work with comedians, we need to work with psychologists, and we need also to just plain, work with people. That's what I think. And get that. Also, we need to portray sexuality as part of adulthood and make being a responsible adult a very desirable thing.
No, I feel in that context that the difference between intimacy and a more pornographic approach to sexuality should also be inculcated, because a lot of these kids, their concept of it is what they've gotten from movies and from the tube.
You know, the dullest thing, my objection to X-rated filming, I've viewed some of it, is that it's so stupid. I mean, I think I could write porno and I could direct it. I'm not going to do it because it'd be bad karma and I'd come back with epilepsy for 1,000 years. If Edgar Casey's corrected, epilepsy's a punishment for misuse of sexual energy. But I mean, the porno I've seen is just redundant, boring after a while, and stupid. And all I do is sit there and say, hey, I wouldn't do it that way. And I, sort of nag them. I've very seldom seen anything. And, when I've sat down and said, well, what would it be like if I filmed myself with my lady doing something? And it wouldn't be, it isn't subject to film. You can't really depict that.
No.
And I've seen some delicious stuff, but 99, 44, 100% of the porn is for people with low imagination quotients, and it's dumb and stupid and listless and pointless. It's debased. It's moronic. And not exciting at all. I mean, to an adolescent it might be, but I always had much more of a visual imagination, and most of the people who are making those films are idiots.
They think they're giving people, or some people, what they want.
Well, you see, we've got to see that, again, what people want isn't necessarily the desideratum. They don't necessarily know what they want.
Yeah, well, the advertising or the media tells them what they want.
I think that we need to look. You can't censor things very effectively, except when you can. There are certain things that need to be dead stopped. But, like, for instance, child pornography.
Oh, yeah.
I agree that that is a no-no. I also, I can't sympathize with the whole Mapplethorpe thing, but that the homoerotic photography. I don't see the point in it. I think that painting Piss Christ, let's say, I understand that that's a beautiful picture of a crucifix. If you see it in that red tone. And the guy may be making a metaphor that you can't defile the Christ. But I think he's going to an extreme to do it. And I think there's a certain arrogance in the art community toward the fundamentalists. It's a redneck phobia. Because they are culturally stunted and stupid. It's fun to make fun of people, or they're viewed as that. And it's fun to make fun of people who are seen as culturally stunted and stupid.
Yeah.
See what I mean? Then you can feel superior. So, you see, there's a whole transformation here that needs to be done. And we just have too much data. That's the only problem. I mean, most society does.
Yeah, data.
And then what's going to happen with that is in chapters 16 and 17 in Future Shock. You're going to have people who deny the existence of all things but one, who revert to more primitive lifestyles. Look at Jimmy Jones, look at the Manson phenomenon. I have people do research papers on this. And then you have super simplifiers. There's one way, Jesus, L. Ron Hubbard, whatever. And then you've got specialists. All I do is obey orders. Well, you had that in Germany, didn't you? I'm not responsible for this death camp. I'm just obeying orders.
Yeah, well, that's what the conscience, the moral integrity of the individual is not there.
So what we're doing in sex education is not just everybody's afraid of showing missionary position and different ways of doing it. I don't think that's the point. I think that it needs to be presented in terms of showing childbirth first.
The end product.
Yeah, the end product, and that this is what produces it.
That's a good angle.
And then the other thing that you need to do is show babies that are born out of wedlock who are dying of AIDS. You have pictures of them. Dead babies. This is where adults need to be brought in. And then live, happy babies that are born in wholesome environments, and say to the kids, what kind of environment do you want to have for your kids? You have a responsibility here of reproduction. Now, what kind of environment do you want to have?
That's a real good point.
And I think that,
Confront them with a responsibility.
yeah, confront them with a
Right
responsibility.
away. With the end
See, a
result.
lot of people, you see, they get all this herky stuff. I think that a lot of people are terribly jealous, particularly if they've only had one or two sexual partners. They're terribly afraid that they're not that good sexually. And they're never going to admit that, so they become very phobic at people who've had more sexual partners. Or the idea of it. And there's a lot of people, well, this is what Reib could call muscular neurosis, and I suppose Scott Peck's terminology could be applied whether he would or not, I wouldn't dare say, but you could apply it to say it's evil. They're suppressive. See what I mean? There's a lot more going on than just saying praise the Lord. You know?